Mr. Huelskamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate moving to the front of the line here. That kind of surprised me a little bit. Gentlemen, thanks for your testimony. I apologize for Mr. Field coming and winning the award for traveling the furthest distance, oftentimes coming from halfway across the country. I wish I were further away from the regulators in Washington, but appreciate your description of what actually happens on a ranch and what you fear these proposed regulations might do for you. It certainly is a vast overreach, and certainly being in agriculture myself, I'm worried about what happens, whether it's dry stream beds, backyard ponds. We wish we actually had road ditches with water in them, but I understand, my understanding of the rule would mean that they would have a regulatory nexus from Washington to interfere with those as well, and creating that regulatory uncertainty. And this fast overreach is creating some problems. I wish for Mr. Field and Mr. Parks, if you describe a little further what changes you believe you might have to make. And again, that's the difficulty, is the regulatory uncertainty, because this is not the first time there's been proposal to strike the word navigable and say, hey, that doesn't count anymore, even though that's certainly the intention of Congress. So if you describe a little more specifically what you think you might have to do, and the cost of doing those in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Congressman. And the biggest question, as you've highlighted, is being asked to explain hypothetically what will happen when I can't clearly tell you what the rule means is very difficult, but I will do my very best. The biggest challenge, and I reference this list, this is a list of the 56 pre-approved practices that EPA has deemed are not going to create a discharge if an individual, and these are related to farming and agricultural activities, if an individual executes those as prescribed by NRCS. So just for my example, we talked a little bit earlier about fencing or prescribed grazing. I have, clearly it would create additional expense and burden on my operation to have to go through and create NRCS approved grazing plans to ensure that in areas where I have a riparian pasture, if I have a fence that touches that riparian area, meaning if it floods at any time of the year and then that water drains back into a tributary, which the EPA may deem has connectivity under their broad definition of authority, I then, if I'm not grazing in accordance to my NRCS approved plan, could be found out of compliance, thus being required to obtain a 404 permit for cattle grazing in a riparian area. Hearing the good gentleman to my right speak about the challenges they have in obtaining permits for constructing homes, I have no expectation whatsoever to do that. I'm a small, extremely small business, got 55 mama cows. That's one truckload. I can't afford an attorney or an environmental consultant. I'd like to think I'm a fairly intelligent individual being able to read the law, but I can't honestly tell you what the expense would mean to my operation in terms of compliance with the environmental regulation. I want clean water. I drink the same water that my neighbors down the stream do. I want good, clean groundwater. I want clean surface water. But the best, in my opinion, the best way we get there is through local decisions, and that happens at the local level in the state and county.
Thank you, Mr. Field. Mr. Parks?
If I could sum this up in 3 words, I'd say cost, delay, and uncertainty. Those are going to be the big 3 things that come out of this. I believe that increased regulated area is going to be significant. I think one concern that we have is we have developed a level of competency over the years understanding how to play this game. And now the rules are going to change significantly. So there's going to be a pretty significant learning curve for that, both for the regulated community as well as those that are in charge of regulating. That causes delay, and there's a cost to that. We make substantial investments on these natural resources. We lease those many years down the road. And we're concerned that because jurisdictional determinations are subject to review every 5 years, what's going to happen to deposits that we have banked on mining that are now going to be off limits. So there's a lot of uncertainty that exists with this, and it creates a potential for a much, much broader regulated area.
Mr. Parks, one last quick follow-up. As far as planning ahead, how many years out do you make purchases in order to secure those deposits? I mean, certainly more than 5 years.
Absolutely. It's not uncommon. Typically in the 15 to 30-year range is what most of our leases terms are.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.